of part 1 I was preparing the rails, and the next step is to bring them all to size. I'm going to use the shooting board, and there's a nice looking sanding block or something like that, and for small pieces to not break the ends, this will work very nicely. So I'm going to use the same strip, 3mm, that I use for making the notches or the small slots for the rails. I'm going to do multiple passes on the ends of the rails, so it will create a nice, it will create for the saw a nice groove. So I'm making this sort of a rabbet at the end of each rail, and with the Japanese marking gouge I'm gonna just make heavy passes. I'm bringing them all to level so they will sit exactly the same on the frame. So I'm doing this small rabbet at the end of each rail, because in the past I tried different versions where I just insert it in a slot, and because they are so thin, they are bending, or I had problems with the glue, and with this small rabbet it will go over it and everything will look much more cleaner. I'm also, after I insert them, I'll put a dab of glue on the back side, just to be sure that everything stays in place. I cut these scraps that will go on the corner of each joint. I'm using them so the frame element doesn't slide, and I can put some pressure without having to worry that it will slip too much. And you can see I'm using this glue dispenser that has a metal tip. It's nice because I can scratch a little bit the joint. And here you can see if I push on them, the two little scraps will act as a stopper. This joint is more aesthetic, it doesn't have any strength. But for this case, for this product, it really doesn't need to have any strength, and all the other pieces will reinforce the structure. While the glue is drying, I'm gonna start working on the decorative frame that goes inside between the paper and the frame of the lamp. And this frame makes a nice transition and also has a practical role, because when I'm gonna insert the paper panels, it will hide some of the edges and everything will look nice and clean. As you can see, I'm using this jig that I made. This is 45 degrees, and I'm gonna insert each element and gonna do a few passes until the block pen reaches the jig. So I'm gonna have a consistent chamfer. And I choose this pine because from the white of the paper and the dark color of the walnut, it makes a nice transition. I had a little problem with one of the frame, and it somehow didn't sit properly, so I just took it apart, that one element, and glue it again. But I introduced some gaps. And this is not the end of the world. I mean, this is fixable, so the end product is more important than getting caught up in the mistakes. For fixing this kind of gaps, you can use a little bit of glue and some sawdust, and at the end you will not see there's any gap. So once they are all glued up, I'm gonna start working on the panels, the paper panels, and to have a really nice stretch paper, I'm building also a small frame. And to make it more easy for me, I 3D printed this corner jigs. In the past, I would just use a square and put some tape, and that works fine. I just made these small jigs for convenience sake. Again, I'm using this glue dispenser. I bought a couple of them from Amazon, and on this one I put some shoji glue. I think it's some kind of a rice-based glue, and it works wonderful for this purpose. I also suggest this rotary cutter tool. This thing is amazing. And you can see when this glue dries up, it disappears. I made a small time lapse there. With this rotary tool, it's easy to go and not rip the paper. With the classic cutter, I had some issues because if it wasn't dry or 100% dry, I would have ripped a little bit the paper. But with this rotary tool, just everything is perfect. So you can see how it fits in the rivets of the frame. And before, I want to chamfer all the edges of the lamp, but before that I'm gonna go a few passes with some sandpaper. For the chamfering I'm gonna use this Japanese plane. And I did this after I've sanding because I want this sharp chamfer. On the sides with the rails I cannot use that plane, so I'm gonna do the same number of strokes with a small plane. I'm gonna apply a few coats of shellac. And then just take off the raised grain, the raised fibers. As a finishing, I'm using this wax, Renaissance wax. It just adds this nice sheen and it adds a protection. I'm gonna glue up the paper panels, and I'm gonna do it with normal wood glue. Just be careful to have a thin line so you don't get it on the paper because it will show. And one of the most difficult things is for these small papers is either how you hold them or how you clamp them. And for clamping these papers, I'm gonna use these flexible strips. And they will just put pressure. So there you have it. It's almost done. The paper is really nicely stretched, but still I want it to be even more stretched. So one tip is to use a little bit of water. This will make the fibers of the paper contract. So you can see it's really nice and stretched. It just makes it more nice. For the base, usually I'm doing this kind of base, and I'm screwing this ceramic socket on it, but I also use this kind of self-standing socket, and I have a couple of them in the house. I'm not gonna go through them. You can use whatever you want, or you can make one yourself. For this one that I built, probably will have this black ceramic socket and with the base, and you can see when I light it up, the light is so uniform. It really makes a nice light. And you can see I have a bunch of them, and you can stack them. And in my videos there always is some light on the right, and actually these are two lamps that are on top of each other, and one of them doesn't have a top. And I made these clips, and you can just, with friction, you can clamp the sides. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'm gonna have the plans in the description, and thanks for watching.